Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce our team for Plenary 12, Communications for Planetary Health, Unblocking Channels and Charting Solutions. Please allow me to introduce, first of all, Mr. Danial Rahman, Chief Executive Officer of Asian Strategy and Leadership Institute here at Sunway University. Danial will have to leave for Friday prayers at some point in time. Ms. Shweta Narayan, International Climate and Health Campaigner, Healthcare Without Harm. Can I also invite Dr. Erin Hughey, Director of Global Operations, Pacific Disaster Center. Also, Professor Sarah Finnie, Director of the 51% Project. I'm moderating the session, Mr. Oliver Lacey-Hall, Strategy Advisor for the Sunway Center for Planetary Health. Danial has had a career as a senior humanitarian leader at the United Nations. Oliver currently works as a strategic advisor at the Sunway Center for Planetary Health, where he led development of the Planetary Health Roadmap and is a practice fellow at the University of Virginia's Humanitarian Initiative. So Oliver, no pressure, but the session is yours.
Thank you very much indeed. It's great to be here. That was a really rapid changeover, so thank you very much indeed to the amazing team that has been running this behind the scenes for making that so quick. We're going to talk about communications in this session, communications for planetary health. Let me just very briefly introduce our four panelists who are going to speak. Thank you. Louder a bit, okay. Who are going to speak briefly. We want to make sure that this session is as interactive as possible, so there'll be plenty of time for questions and answers, even if we do run a little bit late. So starting furthest away from me, Danial Rahman, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Asian Strategy and Leadership Institute in Malaysia. Danial has significant leadership, broadcast media and policy advocacy experience, and he'll bring those insights when we discuss effective communication strategies for driving the kind of transformative change that we know that we need in the context of planetary health. Next to him is Sarah Finnie, who is the director of the 51% Project based at Boston University. Sarah has a background in climate-related strategic communications and advocacy, and she'll tell you a little bit more about what she's been up to, which is actually incredibly interesting. Next to her is Shweta she's the Global Climate and Health Campaigner at Healthcare Without Harm, India. Huge experience in advocating for climate and health equity, and that positions her really well to discuss the communications and opportunities and challenges that we're going to look at today. And last but by no means least, and for those of you that were in the data session the other day, you'll know Erin Hughey, who's the Director of Global Operations at the Pacific Disaster Center in Hawaii, a very firm friend of the Sunway Center for Planetary Health, has extensive experience in disaster management that really will equip her to offer some fresh perspectives on communications, resilience, adaptation in the face of the kind of planetary health crises that we are facing today. Before we dive in, for those of you that were in the Connecting Narrative session that took place on Wednesday, is it Friday today? My brain is a bit fried, but I think on Wednesday, there were 2 or 3 recommendations that they wanted me to feed into this session for our panelists to think about as they talk today, and perhaps for all of us to think about a little bit. And the 3 are, firstly, that safe in biophysical terms and just in terms of significant harm to people boundaries really need to guide strategies for planetary health. I think that's probably something we'll look at a little bit more this afternoon as we dive into the development of the roadmap and the action plan. Secondly, and I don't think this is new, but it's important that we keep thinking about it and we keep saying it. We need to step up our collaboration, especially with political scientists, with lawyers, and I think Andre Hoffman spoke to this in the session, to design and implement really target-based advocacy to influence social and policy landscape and maximize the co-benefits for environment, climate, and human health. And thirdly, and essentially, we need to make sure that to the extent that we can in this emergency situation, we cut through misinformation, disinformation, ignorance, and apathy that's stalling action. And those are all issues that are highlighted in the roadmap. Right. We'd like to wake you up a little bit, make sure that your tech is working. So, can you please get your phones out? Can you open Slido? It's up here. And we're going to ask you 2 or 3 questions. Are we ready with the questions? Right, question 1. What was Sunway City? This is just to test your general knowledge and see if you've been listening this week. What was Sunway City before it was a city? 4 potential possibilities: a wildlife reserve, a tin mine, an airport, or a black hole. 2 black holes, okay. Tin mine, okay. An airport, 1%. So people have a good sense of humor. I mean, if you talk to Tan Sri Jeffrey Cheer, he may say actually it was a bit of a black hole before he managed to turn it into the city. Okay, good. So yes, correct answer, a tin mine. Question 2, please, if you can put that up. How many languages are spoken in Malaysia? And the multiple choice here, is it 1, 3? Is it 30? Is it more than 120? Or is it more than 150? You're wrong. Majority, you're wrong. Think again. It is actually 136. 136 languages are spoken in this very diverse country. That's amazing, huh? Okay. 3rd and toughest question. Who do you think is Planetary Health's primary audience? And you get 3 goes at this. And we're going to generate a word cloud for us. Please have a quick think about this, type in your answers, and we'll see what comes up. So the size of the print on the word cloud means the number of answers. And everyone is sitting very firmly in the middle there. And my sense is that every single answer on that word cloud is the correct answer. So congratulate yourselves for that. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so what are we trying to do in this session? We're trying to start to drive towards the conclusion of what have been 3 extremely rich days of conversations and discussions. And we're putting the communications piece on the table because I think, as we've discussed in a number of sessions over the last few days, if we're not communicating outside our bubble, outside our comfort zone, we're not effecting the kind of change that we know we need to see. We're going to talk a little bit about the roadmap, which will be discussed in much more detail later today. That roadmap provides what we need in terms of understanding, providing some guidance on communications. Chapter 6 of that roadmap is the action plan, i.e. what we're going to do next. And I think in this session we want to kind of dig down into how we can best start to think about communicating the messages that we need to communicate. We had 2 or 3 meetings, panel and I, to discuss this and scratched our heads a lot, and we figured out maybe there are some key questions we can try and answer. So we're going to look at, firstly, what's working, and Sarah's got some good stuff to tell us about that. Secondly, we're going to look at how do you generate lift for the kind of communications campaign and strategy that we know that we need. Global, local, regional, at all levels. As Jamila said on Tuesday, everything, everywhere, all at once. How do we start to think that through? Shweta, I think, is going to talk a little bit about pitfalls and difficulties and problems that we need to be aware of that are going to face as we go forward. And Daniel's going to take that down away from big picture to the individual level. What can we be doing individually? So I will shuffle over here. Thank you. And I'm going to start, Sarah, if I can, with you. I mean, I think you're already kind of out of the starting blocks on this, on thinking through climate change, planetary health communications. Can you tell us a bit about that? And also, as you do that, just think a little bit about where the Alliance, we as a community need to go. We've got sort of tools. We've got Sao Paulo Declaration. We've got the Kuala Lumpur Call to Action, which is coming up this afternoon for discussion. We've got the roadmap. We've got some tools. What do we need to do next? Where do we need to go? Take mine and I'll take yours. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Hello, friends. And I am stealing that from my new colleague, Britt Ray, who begins every address I've noticed by saying, hello, friends. That's important because we're making some distinctions here. And if we could move to the next slide, TJ, if you're anywhere in here, here we go. So my work has been to distill every scrap of behavioral science, data, and research that pertains to our critical topic of how to communicate the urgency and the great potential and opportunity for solving the greatest problem and situation that humanity has ever faced in the history of our existence. So this has not been a very easy or casual project for me. I launched it 5 years ago, based it at the Boston University Institute for Global Sustainability, where I am a senior fellow. And after 5 years of behaving like a mad chef, taking a soy-based balsamic cauldron and reducing it to a perfect sauce, out bubbled 12 principles. And here they are. They are not rocket science. They are easy peasy. And I am hoping that they will be useful to all of us in this room and to our immediate colleagues and teams as we go forward and get really smart about how to communicate and with whom we need to be communicating and what those people will be open to hearing. So I thought I would just take the first two. I could do all 12 easily, but we have prayers, we have all kinds of things going on. So the first thing is to talk about it. And we find that at least in America, where my research is situated, and I am focused very much on what I call the influential complacents. These are people who may be very much aware of the problems of planetary health, and influential in their communities, in their families, in their social circles, at their golf clubs, in their alumni associations, at their gyms. But are they doing everything they possibly can to actually advance the solutions that we have been mandated and recommended? No, they are not. So when we think about talking with our desired audiences, I've just identified mine, I have to meet them where they are. I have to understand what their values are, what they care about. Oftentimes they care about their financial holdings, it's true. So there has to be a way to speak in their language. The second principle that I'm going to mention is to use trusted messengers. And we are all in this room trusted messengers. Much depends on the tone of our communication and what we choose to say. So number 4, lighten up, is simply an invitation to turn on your charm. Stop your preaching and try to have a bit of a sense of humor, great confidence and clarity, as the women on the previous panel, I thought, exemplified 100%. So, keep it simple. Number 3, just to remind you, in the United States, nobody knows what 1.5 degrees Celsius is. We don't have Celsius over there. We still have Fahrenheit. So you see, we need to be translators for the audiences that we're communicating to. I'm going to leave it there because I know I'm happy to talk more about any of them, but I would like to leave it there if I could.
That's lovely, Sarah. Thank you very much indeed. And so beautifully simple. Understanding people talking in their language, that's great. Okay, let's move on. Erin, let me come to you. You gave a great session the other day, talked about the importance of data to tell stories. I think, as we think through the communications challenges that we have, we look at the idea of trying to use the action plan from the roadmap to launch some kind of global strategy. What does that look like? What do we need to be doing? What do we need to be avoiding?
Thank you. Aloha, everyone. Okay. If you were in my session, you know from Hawaii when we say aloha, you have to return it. So aloha. All right, I know it's before lunch, so I'm gonna do my best. And I'm talking about data. One thing that I wanna note is that data has been brought up in every single session that I've attended, without exception. And there are 2 points that I wanna make on that. One, I think we need to be very careful not to equate data with insight. Data is just a point on a map. Data does not necessarily bring clarity and will not necessarily bring us the insight we need to make decisions. We have to combine that data with our knowledge set, with our goals, with a plan of action. And that's where I think when we talk about planetary health, we need to start. So we do need to talk about data, but we need to talk about how we bring data together and what data is needed. The second piece that I want to talk about related to data is that accuracy and precision are not the same thing. We need accurate data, but do we need data so precise that it goes down to the street corner that you're on? Or can we just simply say your neighborhood will be affected? And I think that as researchers, we often get so caught up in analysis paralysis that we forget that we need to be accurate, but perhaps we need to stop trying to be so precise. So that's what I think the first step is. The second step I want to mention is, as it relates to planetary health, this is a global issue, but it has to be locally communicated. So we have to make sure that it resonates. And I'll say in Hawaii, this comes up with disaster management all the time. The way we communicated after the Maui fires, everybody wanted to tell folks, you need to put boots on if you're gonna go into this area. And I can tell you there's not a soul on Maui, unless you're working construction, that owns a pair of boots. You need to tell them you can't wear your slippers. You cannot wear your slippers in this area. And that sounds simple, but it was very, very important. I also want to note that we have to focus on branding if we're going to improve communication. So raise your hand if you know what planetary health is. Okay, now raise your hand if you could effectively communicate planetary health in 30 seconds while on camera. Yeah, not as many hands opening, not as many hands going up. I wouldn't even say that I could do it in 30 seconds. So having that tagline, PDC often uses safer world, right? I'm trying to build a safer world through building resilience. So having those key pieces, I think are really important, that you've got your sound bites. And I just want to talk about a little bit from the do's and don'ts. So if we've branded, I do want to say, as you're communicating to your family, if you have a PhD, use accessible language. They're not following you. We're either too in the weeds, or we're using language that doesn't resonate with them. And I also want to note on the don't side, don't compete, make sure you collaborate. And I know we give that a lot of lip service, but I'm not seeing enough of it. So think about how you can amplify the amazing research that's happening at another university, Or how can we amplify great messaging that's coming from another institution? We don't always have to be the generator of the best idea. We can certainly be the amplifier of a great and wonderful idea that will advance planetary health. So I think I'll stop with that. Thank you.
A living, walking, breathing example of effective communication. Thank you, Erin, very much indeed. That was great. I mean, the way you delivered that, very, very clear points for everybody to reflect on and think about. So thank you for that. Shweta, it's your turn now. I mean, when we were talking about this, we agreed, let's keep the discussion as simple as we can. And Erin's just reminded us of the importance of everybody doing that. So let me ask you a seemingly simple question, but I don't know whether it is. If planetary health makes such good sense, and the fact that we have 1,000 people participating in this conference this week would seem to indicate that 1,000 people think that it does make good sense, what's not working from a communications perspective? Where do we need to put our energies? And where do we need to stop putting our energies, perhaps more importantly? Sorry.
I know we discussed this, and this was supposed to be a simple question, but this is the most difficult question, I think, to answer. But I think this is a very important question to also acknowledge and answer, that the fact that somewhere our communication strategies are not working, and we need to acknowledge this in order to fix this problem. Unless we recognize and reconcile with the fact that we have a problem, we will never have a solution. And let me give you a very, very current example of how the urgency and the crisis that we are facing and the communications around is not working. This year, more than half of the world's population is going into election. Today, India, my country, one of the largest democracies in the world, has started its voting process. How many times have you heard political leaders make climate the election agenda? The fact that today there is a heat wave alert in 90% of India, extreme heat alert, and we have elections where 1.4 billion population country is going to go vote. Does it make sense? Is there any urgency? Are we thinking about protecting people? And that's where I feel collectively we have failed. So fine, there is an acknowledgement that we failed, but we need to fix it. And I think my co-panelists have already started with solutions as to how do we fix it. To me, there are a couple of things that are very, very important. The issue is complex. There's a lot of data. Not everybody understands data. The session that we had on air pollution yesterday was a perfect example of communications. Somebody tells you the air quality is 400, or PM 2.5 is 400 micrograms. What difference does it make? Nothing. What does 400 mean? Even if it means it's a death sentence for children. But somebody shows you those black lungs, lungs with pigment, and that too, a trusted messenger, a doctor tells you, this is what 400 means. Would that make a difference? We need to demystify data. We need to make data relatable to people. How does it affect me, my child, my family, my community? And that is what brings the shared sense of urgency. And unless we have a community around us that collectively thinks about it, we will not be able to make a change. Now, two more things, actually three. So, while we are communicating data, I think it's important to communicate our stories. We need to tell stories. Visual, oral, I mean, stories is one thing that they are the connecting cords that bring communities together. Stories disempower people, but stories also empower people. We need to reclaim that space and tell our stories. And through this, we need to build power. We need to bring the most vulnerable at the forefront and let them tell their stories. That is going to move people. That has the emotional connection that will force you to think twice before making any mistakes. I strongly believe that. And finally, my final point, we feel that we are alone because not by, I think there is a design, and the climate deniers and the fossil fuel industries, I must say, are pumping a lot of money to make us feel like we are a small group. The reality, and this is a article that has been, a research that has been recently published in the Nature article, which surveyed, academics surveyed over 125,000 people around the world. And they found that 80 to 90% of people believed that we are in a crisis, wanted the government to take action. But the real eye-opener was that over 69% of this group was willing to contribute more than 1% of their personal income in climate action. However...
Say it again, say it again.
So out of the 129,000 people who were surveyed, over 69% were willing to make personal monetary donation towards climate action, while they wanted to hold their governments accountable. However, this is where the tricky bit comes in, and this is where the core of the problem comes in. When asked how other people's believe, this was only 43%. So that means people, and this is what is scientists call pluralistic ignorance, where our belief of other people's belief is diminished. I believe in climate action. I don't think others believe in climate action. That's what's happening. And that's happening because the media and the vested interests are making us think that we are alone. The fact is that we are not alone. And the fact is that if we are not alone, why are we acting alone? So there's a lot, and probably my communication is not that great to let this sink in, but let's think about it. We are the majority. And it's time that we act like we are the majority.
Fabulous, Shweta, thank you very much indeed. I mean, just to go back to this point about the most vulnerable telling their stories, I don't know who was in the session yesterday afternoon in which Owen Pennell's BBC documentary was shown. If you were, I'm sure you had the same reaction that I did, which was real sadness. But it was interesting what he said, that just before he was about to scratch... Owen, are you in the room? Okay, we'll come to you. I'm going to ask you to speak in a minute, but he basically... So I'll let you speak a bit later. Danial, let's
Oliver.
come to you. Okay, and I kind of outlined the question that we were going to ask you, but I've got it written down here, so I'm going to go again. I mean, your interest is really on kind of individual uptake, individual responsibility. And I think this makes absolute sense, because actually, everything we're talking about relates back to us as individuals and how we act and how we behave and what we do and how we accept our responsibilities. Give us some thoughts.
Right, thanks Oliver. Hello everyone, Assalamualaikum, good afternoon. I'm the guy who Paul so kindly singled out earlier. They may have to leave early, but don't worry about it. Thanks Paul for singling me out earlier. Anyway, so the question I had here was, how do we move people? And let's just start with a bit of, I'd like to ask you a question. How many of you are a single child? Can I see a show of hands? Have got 2 siblings? 3 siblings? 4? 5? 6? Few of you? 7? 8? Oh, what? 9? 10? 11? 12? 13? Tantri? 12? 13? Dr. Jamila, 13? 14? 15? 16? 17? Anything more than that? No. All right, so I knew somebody who had 17 siblings, an auntie. And what do you do if you have 17 siblings and everybody is kind of getting married around the same time and having kids at the same time? Well, naturally, this family started an NGO on environmentalism for children called Yawa. So this was something that happened back in 1995. It's called the Children's Environmental Heritage Foundation, and it was an NGO that I was part of. Just to share a bit of a story. And this was back in 1995, I was involved for a conference where the young people were asked to do a presentation about sustainable development. So I was, I think, 15 years old. First time I'm hearing the word sustainable development back in 2002. And we were asked to like dress up as palm trees and to present, yeah, palm oil trees, you know, really cute, I assure you, to present to a group of a plantation society about the importance of sustainable development in the palm oil industry. 1992, that's what, 22 years now. And we were, imagine young kids every week going and practicing, scripting, recording, doing everything we can. And on the night of the presentation, it was a dinner event, the adults didn't really seem to care. We had just maybe a splattering of applause, and nevertheless we did our best. But I remember one thing. The lady who started this foundation is called Umi. We fondly call her Umi, and Umi in Malay means mother, so everybody calls her mother, Umi. And she says, don't worry, because you have made a change in some of the lives of the adults that see you, right? And 22 years on, the bunch of us young children who have now become adults, you know, some are big shots in the industry, have all carried this environmental consciousness, planetary consciousness with them. And that's the first thing I want to share here about how do you move people. Remember that the effort to save the environment is constant, and it is something that you must continue doing and doing and doing. 22 years on, we are still fighting the same fight, and I believe that has made some change. Right. The second thing is, when I was posed with this question, I came up with an acronym. So the question was, how do we move people? I said, let's think of it. M, motivate. That sounds really good. I mean, you know, Malaysians, we love acronyms, right? We look at PHAM. Everyone goes, what's PHAM? It's Planetary Alliance meeting. So it's a meeting. No, it's a summit. But can everybody come? Yes, but why is it called a meeting? Sorry, this is just a bit of a side thing, right? But the point is, we're all here. So let me just very quickly run through this. Oops, when the phone gets locked. Okay, so M, motivate. Motivate, I think we have to understand that people need continuous motivation. Once upon a time, there was this campaign called Meatless Mondays, where it led to about 10% of reduction of meat within the particular community. Then in Indonesia, okay, today's a Friday, so, you know, in Islam, and there are some speakers who've talked about the concept of custodianship and environmentalism. In Islam, there's a verse in the Quran which says, the true servants of the most compassionate God are those who walk on the earth humbly. So they are humble to what we have on the earth, their gratitude for it, and they see what we have as a matter of trust. And in Indonesia, back in 2013, a research piece was done where when Islamic concepts were aligned with environmentalism within sermons, it actually led to a higher consciousness of the environmentalism amongst the community. So I know my fellow speakers here spoke about contextualizing the message, and that's one way to motivate people to be conscious of environmentalism, planetary health from different perspectives. That's M. The second one is O. I'll be quick. O is organize. And what we've seen here, and all of you here are organizers or community organizers in your own way. My environmental foundation was one such of it. The other one that we all do is, for example, Earth Hour, right? Everyone's heard of Earth Hour, everyone gets excited by it. And I remember reading a statistic where every time we observe Earth Hour, something like 4.7 million kilowatt hours of electricity is saved. Now, you don't really shift the needle in that 1 hour, but you create consciousness. And I believe you were speaking about, Erin was mentioning about branding, right? The importance of a brand to excite young people, to excite children. So that's O. Now V. I'll be very honest with you, I couldn't come up with a V. Like motivate, organize. What do I put for V? Silent. Okay, let's assume it's a silent V, right? Let's move on to E now. And E is to empower. And there's a story from India about the rainforest man of India, Jadav Payeng, if I'm not mistaken. And he had observed that snakes were dying in the heat in a particular state because there was no coverage, foliage. And he then started planting a tree, which actually led to the creation of a rainforest. So if you Google up Rainforest Man of India, you'll find this example. And of course, you know, as Erin, Sarah, even Shweta has talked about, science is important, data is important, and being able to message out effectively is very important. And that's where the empowerment comes from. All of us here are here to empower ourselves, but to empower the people around us. Last but not least, I want to say this though. The dose of reality is, it is a continuous journey. I've mentioned this earlier, but let's make planetary health communication part of our 10,000 steps a day. If everybody aims for 10,000 steps for healthiness, let's keep moving, or if there's no V, let's keep mooing. I don't know, does it make sense? And hopefully with this kind of communication, thinking, and appreciation, we can move the needle. Thank you.
I'll come up with a V at some point, but I'm not quite sure when or how. Thank you. Thank you all very much indeed. I think that really sets the stage very nicely. We'd agreed we wouldn't talk too much because we really wanted to engage with the people in the room. We know we have a number of people working as communications professionals, and we think a lot of people have opinions and views. What we're really trying to do is to think through how do we effect the kind of change that we need to effect to bring a more effective communications strategy plan forward in support of the roadmap, which we'll discuss this afternoon. It would be great to get views, opinions, questions, answers from the audience now. And we've got, I think, 15 or so minutes for a bit of a discussion. So the Slido, I think, is going up for people who would like to ask on Slido, but the mics are also available and ready. So please feel free to raise your hand and ask a question. Amelia, there's a mic right behind you, which I think will be brought to you.
Hi, thank you so much. It's so inspiring to hear people really working in communications and making that an important part of this campaign. So my question is, a lot of people here are scientists and they've gone through many years of education where the idea of emotion and of partiality as opposed to impartiality has been like beaten out of them. But I think we can all feel in the room the amount of emotion and enthusiasm there is here today. So how do we empower people to use their emotions and their personal kind of power to kind of make that communication more effective in a way that's still acceptable within science and academia and, the powers that be, to say?
Lovely, great, really great question. Let's take two or three and then come back. So there's one on, there's a V. We got your V, Danial. Vitalize. Okay, another question. Can you give advice for dealing with deniers, especially if there are families? That's a really, really good question. Anybody else? Right at the back, please, hand up, right at the back of the room. Oh, you've got it, sir. Sorry, yes, over to you, and then there's somebody behind you at the back of the room. So let's take two. Yes, please, sir.
All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm Emmanuel Benyogo, and more like a comment or a call to action, and it's how do we communicate what we are not measuring, or what we can explain planetary health, we can see the impact, but can we, our responsibilities as how we use nature, do we know, for example, this institution, this building, our houses, do we measure ourselves? And then that way we can easily communicate what we expect people to do. So some very example I use with my colleagues is, I say, your PhD research you're doing, do you know what impact it has on the environment? If you have to do like a research, if you did it 4 times and you did it 3 times, or you did it only twice, was there any difference? Did you have to do an extra run of that experiment? So if we personally start to think about our own processes, then it's easy for us to communicate and not just point fingers to the manufacturers or the financial institutions, but we are able to, because we are still using the products that they provide. The fuel for our cars, or this building, the cement, we still consume those things. So if we cannot measure how much of them we are depending on, then it's difficult to communicate. Thank you.
It's a fabulous question. Thank you very much indeed. Lady at the back. Do you have a mic? Okay, good.
Can you hear me?
We hear you loud and clear, like you were right next to me. Hello.
Hi, hello. I actually wanted to add perspective to what the V could be. Also, my name is Janna. I'm from Greenish Foundation in Egypt. I think the V could be for vision, or what do we visualize for planetary health? And that could also help with communication in terms of how do we imagine our relationships with the planet? And so, yeah, I think that would be useful for communication as well and how to move people. What is the vision for planetary health? Thank you.
So I'll give you 30 seconds to think about that and then ask you to elaborate the V. Okay. Yes, one more question there, and then we'll stop and do some answers. Sorry, could you just, I forgot to ask, but please can you just identify yourself?
Hi, my name is Claudia. I work for the UCL Warning Research Center and the UK government. My question is about how do buzzwords like Anthropocene, planetary boundaries, natural disasters, tipping points, frame and then shape how we respond to environmental and social crisis? Because it feels to me like they've been used a lot in the media as ways of putting the responsibility into the environment rather than attributing it to the socioeconomic practices or political issues that are driving those crises. Like, you know, Antarctica is melting, it's gonna cause millions of people dying, etc. But is the problem the Antarctica is melting? Is that where the blame should be going? So.
Great question. Okay, we'll just do some answers here and then we'll come back. So there were 3 questions. Amelia's first, this whole issue of science versus emotion, and it's interesting, I recall that Jamila on Tuesday in her opening talked about the need to get emotional and be emotional about planetary health. So I think that's a great follow-up to that. The gentleman who basically said, are we counting ourselves? I was actually listening on my way here in my carbon fuel car on the way here this morning to a podcast where a gentleman was talking about daily measuring your use of carbon. Thinking that through and thinking about how carbon reliant we all are in our daily lives. So I think that's a good question to put out. And buzzwords, otherizing, I would call it. Otherizing, sterilizing, taking it away from ourselves. Who would like to take which question? Erin, which would you like to take? I'll give you the choice first.
I want to take them all, but I'm going to take the first one that came out, which was the science and the communication. So I think the one thing that I want to say is that I think as PhDs and researchers, we get into our cylinders of excellence and we learn to communicate with one another at a very professional level, and we feel very smart and we feel very knowledgeable, and it is very exclusionary. And I think one of the things everybody needs to do is get themselves a Channy. And if you don't know Channy, raise your hand, Channy. Okay, Channy and I are a team. And I've got a bunch of ideas, but she helps me craft the communication in a way that matters to everybody else. And I think that that's really important to realize that you may be the best researcher, the best scientist, and I will not question that. But when we translate that from scientific journal to change and to action, it needs a different type of language, and it needs to be one that is accessible to everybody. And that, I will say, is not a dumbing down of your research. That is an operationalization of your research, and probably the hardest thing that you can do. And I always say, when you see somebody communicating well, that is not because what they're saying is easy, it's because they have taken the time to effectively think about how to reach you. So if you don't have a Channy, find one, but not mine.
Shweta.
I think that's the core of why we are here and why things are not working. Because for way too long, we've been told to be professional, to be scientific, to be rigorous, you have to be unemotional. I'm sorry. We need to reject this narrative. Do you think the scientists who are producing this research are not passionate? And that's why they're producing this research? The research is an outcome of their passion and their care. And I think we need to embrace the fact that we feel love, we feel outrage, we feel upset with things that are happening, and then only change can happen. So I think emotion is at the core of what we are doing, and we should not shy away from feeling emotional. I mean, this is a matter of our future. This is a matter of our children's future. How can we not be emotional? Let's channel that anger, that grief, that love in making a change. So let's be emotional together towards a positive change.
Thanks. It's gone off the screen now, but there was actually a very interesting question, which I think resonates quite well with that, which is, what do we do about people who simply don't understand planetary health? And I think a lot of the problem that we have is, how do we communicate this in ways that people can understand? My frustration as a non-academic, I'll be honest and blunt here, my frustration as a non-academic is that it took me several months to find the definition of planetary health that I could actually engage with and understand. And I've got that now, and it's in my head, and that's fine. But we're dealing with a very complex subject. The reality is, if you can't get it down in 240 characters, we're on a losing wicket. Shweta, back to you.
I'm sorry, I just have one line response to this, and takes me back to the opening ceremony and Dr. Jamila's 3 words: push, push, push. I think in communication, the parallel to those 3 words are repeat, repeat, repeat. That's it. That's how we will break the barriers.
Thank you. Sarah, I don't know which one you'd like to take.
This is such a great question about scientists and emotion. Every scientist I know is very alarmed about this situation. And as a communicator and as someone who is an English literature major and has been devoting her life to, vocabulary for 6 decades, I would say that the advice that Erin gave, which is, if you are a scientist, identify your best friend or colleague who is an excellent communicator, who is that person who at a party everyone is around because they know how to get the message across. Have a weekly lunch with them, or Zoom if you're not on the same continent. But really, it's a matter of us all deciding that we are all in on this and that this is a priority for now until we make some progress. We're not going to take our foot off the pedal, and we need to work together. And one of the greatest things we can do is to use this network, this Planetary Health Alliance, to fire it up and stay in touch, and need to figure out more ways of using and leveraging the power of this community, which we're going to get to with this roadmap and action plan next. And I guess I wanted, on the question on buzzwords, I think buzzwords are so useful until they're not. And when they're not is when sometimes people who are not aligned will use them as an umbrella for cover, So sustainability at this point as a word, when I speak with people in finance, who knows what it means? But so I think it's on us, again, to bring it back to what we think matters, what we know matters, and how do we know that? Because we follow reliable resources, we pay attention to the scientists, we listen to one another who are trusted messengers, we stay up to date, we don't rest on this until this is solved.
Thank you. Do you want to tackle the V thing? Do you want to tackle the V?
Sure. No, so thank you so much. So as I was speaking, a number of you had either messaged me or have put it up here. There's so many V's now. Can't believe I didn't think of one. This will be great for my Wordle tomorrow. Or Quordle. You do 4 at one go. Some of the V's I've been given are visualize. I think that's really nice. You need to visualize. Voice. Dr. Jamila has talked about the voice, especially the voice of the unseen. And, we face the fact that many of us here are very privileged to be here. Oops. Vitalize, values, validate, right? There's validation. There's one that said vibrate from medical students. I don't know, maybe I suppose resonate. And one more, which is vision, right? Thank you, Jannah. Beautiful name, by the way. And of course, Dave Webb, who's watching online, dropped me a message and also said vision. So, setting that vision is also very important. So we've got so many. All right, everybody, let's just recap this. M was for motivate. O, organize. V,
vision.
Visions. And everything else that was mentioned. And E is empower, and everything in between. Now, just very quickly, to answer also the question about buzzwords, I want to take a different angle. How many of you here have more than 10,000 followers across all your social media channels? 50,000. 60,000? 80,000? Over 100,000 followers on social media. I see somebody raising their hand, no? Okay, and how many of you have heard of these people? Queen Work, Eco Talk, New Lifestyle, Alyssa Barber, Sabrina Sustainable Life, no? Matthew Shribman, no? Eco Talk TikTok, Eco Talk, no? Some of you, yeah? I see you're raising your hand constantly. Maybe you can share something in a bit. But the point here is this, like, all of us here may have not heard of these TikTokers, but these are all people who I just Googled up, who are top environmental TikTokers, right? And cumulatively, they may have about 1 million followers. And that's sometimes an interesting thing, that this joint between the practitioner, the business side, and the advocates like us, and people who are doing, you know, TikToking, but have got like 1 million eyeballs. So I just think it's a very interesting juxtaposition as we consider our communication efforts.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. I think you need to go, right? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Let's go back to the... So I just want to tackle one thing before we go back to the room. The question one, sorry, it's gone. Oh. Thank you very much indeed, Daniel. Thank you. So there was a question about whether we're going to measure the environmental impact of holding this conference. It certainly is not planned for, but I think it's something we'll think about and come back to you on this afternoon. It would require everybody in the room to collaborate in order to make that measurement. So maybe it's something worth thinking about. The buzzwords question I think we have addressed. Are there any ongoing initiatives from the attendees here to communicate planetary health to the world? Yes. The Planetary Health Action Plan and Roadmap is where we are trying to go on this. Let's go back to the room. Lady there, you've had your... Oh, hi. Hi. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, this is Jaya from Internews. My question is really to any panelist who wants to take this up. In a climate of growing climate anxiety, what sort of stories should we be telling? I'm hearing a lot of doom and gloom communications here. But in a period of stress, the tendency will then just be to go and look at what the Kardashians are doing. So what kinds of alternatives are we holding up in terms of positive, inspiring stories through our communications that can build a counter-narrative that's not always about doom and gloom? Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. I think there was somebody, one other, yes?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So I actually have like an online platform on Instagram, and like I do a lot of climate communication. What I do exactly is I actually read a lot of the research that I find online. I try to find articles that, you know, I don't talk about things like plastics, fast fashion, veganism. I talk about things that are not particularly exciting, a lot of things that we've talked about this room, and I will screenshot these articles, highlight them up, if you don't read the whole thing, you know, and I'll turn them into memes, which is very informal. It's not serious, but I've been doing this for years, and it has been incredibly successful. The handle is on Instagram. It's at @GoGreenSaveGreen. I have found quite a lot of success in being able to participate in a lot of like wonderful campaigns, and I think that incorporating humor, and again, everybody was saying meeting people where they're at. You know, you don't have to hit them with the complicated thing first. Hit them with the 1-2 punch that immediately gets the gist across, and then go into the details. And like what I have found is that humor has been like a really great unifier, because even when you deliver bad news, well, not bad, when you deliver bad news, it stings a little less and it makes them more receptive to that. So yeah, I would definitely say, like, even though it doesn't necessarily feel serious, it's been incredibly effective.
Great. And it was at Go Green, Stay Green, right?
Go Green, Save Green.
Save Green, S-A-V-E?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Everyone got that? Everyone like it? Okay, good. I think thumbs going up. Okay, so we have one question here on climate anxiety, and then I'd like to look at some of the ones on the screen. What's the solution to people having no idea of planetary health? I think is a really good question. Sarah, do you want to take that one? Because I think, you know, your framework may help to answer this first question, yeah.
May I also talk about climate anxiety a little
You
bit?
may.
Okay, so I think really and truly, climate anxiety, this is something that I've learned since I arrived here this week from Britt Ray and her panels, has been that climate anxiety is not actually mental illness, because it's a perfectly reasonable reaction to understanding the odds that we are up against across this range of planetary health boundaries, 6 of which have been breached decisively, and 3 more we're right on our way to doing those as well. At the same time, and this is the 1-2 punch principle, we also have an unprecedented amount of solutions underway. Policies. In the US, we have an incredible package of climate legislation from our federal government, 400 billion plus in loan guarantees, that has been matched since it was announced just 18 months ago by trillions in private investment globally, and you all know this. So this translates down to the stories that Colin and Jamila so eloquently presented at our gala dinner the other night, the stories of success on the ground. How is this actually turning out? And across the United States, many of the solutions are in territories that predictably vote Republican, which is, in our countries, everything is so polarized now that if you say climate change, half the room runs screaming to the exit, you know? So in a way, it's sort of what's happening now, and let's get beyond the buzzwords. And so one of the greatest solutions, I think, to get back to this, of people having no idea of planetary health, we need to do a better job at the Planetary Health Alliance, all of us, defining what's our buzzword, what's our tagline, how do we explain this in 30 seconds in front of a camera, quickly and in a way that we're all singing off the same sheet. So that's a challenge for us going up, and I think that the roadmap and action plan offers a great framework for that. So we'll know more about that this afternoon, and we'll maybe have a working group or whatever, and I look forward to working on that. Again, I think you just meet people where they are. What matters to them? What do they love? Do they love their children? Do they love their beach house? Do they love their garden? Do they love their free time? Do they love their bottom line? Do they love their business? Do they hate it when their factory is flooded and their people can't get to work? Or people can't get to work because their children can't go to school because there's so much wildfire smoke and pollution in the air. This is affecting everybody, whether they admit it or not. And the deniers are well-funded, well-organized, but they're a tiny minority. They're very powerful, but we can all push on them.
Great, Sarah, thank you. Shweta.
Just attempting to answer the question around how do we tackle the increasing sense of anxiety. I think we need to be very intentional in building a community and support each other. And personally, for me, I have seen arts and activism, music, and having a shared sense of purpose really helps. And we need to forge new ways of dealing with this challenge that we are faced with. And I think a shared sense of community would definitely help us. Just also responding to one of the questions about like any success stories on social media, and one that comes to my mind from India is the collaboration between people who were poisoned by a corporation and musicians and artists that led to a viral rap video. When the word viral itself was very new in 2015. It's called Kodaikanal Won't, which is a rap video about mercury affected workers from a small city in India, Kodaikanal, but it's on the tunes of Nicki Minaj's Anaconda. That video, I mean, people were dying and fighting for over a decade. The moment that music video came into being, we had Mark Ruffalo, Ashton Kutcher, and even Nicki Minaj amplifying that, and suddenly we were front-page news in the whole world, to the point that this global corporation, Unilever, had to come back and negotiate and compensate the workers. So things work. We just need to be at it, and we need to be creative.
Great, thank you. Erin.
Took a minute to get on. So I wanted to answer actually the question. I don't know that we ever addressed the comment on scale of impact and why we focus, I think the gentleman had asked it, on why we're so focused on these large polluters and not necessarily providing action at the individual level. And I just want to make a note, because I think it links also to this anxiety that we were talking about, is that it's the scale of impact. And the individual scale of impact doesn't feel large. It doesn't feel like enough. And I think it goes back to what you first said, which was, if we are not alone, why do we act alone? And I'm taking that quote from you. So I think when we talk about scale, we need to know that the acts that we do today as an individual, I am not going to change everything. But if we all collectively come together, our scale will grow, and we will again amplify what we're doing. And I think that speaks to the need for the collective community and to our approach to come together with a clear vision. We can't tackle everything all at once. And so I think today when we go through the roadmap and we talk about what is the first thing we're going to do, all the way to the sixth step of mainstreaming, is where we collectively come together to amplify our messages. So I'm looking forward to leaving this summit with a plan of action that has all of the colleagues in this room playing an important role. So thank you.
Fabulous. And that is actually how I was going to conclude the session. So thank you for doing that for me. Beautifully summarized. Phones out again, please. Phones out. Slido up, please, if you would be so kind. We have the last Slido question. Do you have and use a social media account, yes or no? So nobody doesn't have a social media account. That's amazing and very positive. Last slide, please. Oh, 4% don't, okay. So, if you've all got a social media account, do something with it now. Say something about Planetary Health. Talk about the roadmap, talk about the action plan, put the hashtags at the bottom on that social media post. Take action. We need to start this at the individual level, and we can build up from there. Thank you very much indeed. Have a nice lunch.